Hello, lovelies. Hollie Hope here with the Sacred Unweaving podcast, where we unravel these sacred perspectives and traditions in order to weave a new, deeper, more embodied human experience. I have the epic, the brilliant Melissa Bradford on. She is a clinical therapist, also has embodied her spiritual component as well. She has followed her soul's calling of wisdom and guides people through the jungle of the psyche with systems and structures. And she's actually been a therapist for 20 years. So she's kind of seen it all through DBT and sand tray therapy and IFS parts work and brain spotting, sound healing, somatic movement. The list of her specialties goes on and on because she is brilliant at studying and asking the really hard questions that sometimes we don't ask ourselves, and then finding those answers so she can support others in their wisdom. So thank you for being on, Melissa. I am really excited to dive into some of this unweaving this therapist component with the sacred spiritual healing as well.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to play and talk through all of it because it's a lot.
It's a lot. Why don't we start with a little bit of probably what the big question for everybody is why a clinical therapist would choose to step into spiritual healing with all of this logical training and understanding. What made you step into this space of the unknown or the less tactile healing versions?
I think for me, the biggest reason is I felt like in doing traditional mental health therapy, I could get clients to a certain point and then we seem to kind of get stuck. Usually the stuck point is either if we think about our mind, body, and soul working together, usually we could get the mind to a certain point and then we were either getting stuck in terms of the body or in terms of the soul. And so I think stepping into like the sacred healing perspective and more spiritual work, it helps kind of do that deeper work to help people find their truth, not only through logic, but also through spiritual and emotional, and then also through somatics and body mapping and understanding the meaning and the messages that our bodies have for us. Because we're often so disconnected from ourselves, from our bodies, and really learning to tune in. And I think for me, also giving people permission to have the woo. Because what I've found also as a therapist is I have a lot of clients that come to me and they don't really have a safe space to talk about things that maybe don't make sense in this realm, and to give them a safe space to get some psychological tools, but also to have a safe space to be like, hey, I'm really struggling. What's a way I can stop this negative energy? And to also talk about freezer spells or shifting negative perspectives or crystals they can wear and be able to have it encompass all of them versus just parts of them.
Interesting when you talk about it because a few hundred years ago, clinical scientists and psychologists came out and said, anything that is not tactile 3D proof and evidence is a matter of psychosis, almost like that witch wound that's coming through. And it's interesting as I've studied it myself, I found that, this all has always existed. And it used to be, you saw something or heard a voice. Wow, that's God talking to you. That's your spiritual side coming through. And nowadays it seems like, oh no, our first thought is, am I crazy?
Right.
And so I love that you're bridging those in to say, this is just the forgotten or the suppressed or the version of control that came through. So I like that you even talk about it being the jungle of the mind and your jungle in your background. That almost is a call to the wild, a call to bring things forward. Now, when you have a client and you're bridging that over, do you find that some of them, it's like the first time that they've ever been able to share some of these things? Do they come to you a lot asking if they're crazy because they're seeing things and hearing things?
Definitely. And I think too, for a lot of them, there's a lot of fear. So if I say this thing, if I say I'm connecting with spirits or ancestors, or if I say, hey, my body's having this weird symptom, doctors can't explain it. So yes, so often I will have clients that come in, oftentimes they'll kind of start with like, if I tell you something, will you think I'm crazy? And, so I also get to share carefully, because again, I need to make sure it's safe for both of us. My own experiences and to give people a place to be like, this is maybe what that means, or this is maybe what your body's telling you. For me, I also use a lot of channeling, and I channel in images. So I feel like it also can be really beautiful and helpful to have clients understand through symbols. I also use sound tray for that as well. For some people, sometimes it's like there's not words. And so having symbols or even being able to say like, hey, I think my chakra's blocked. What does that mean? And being able to talk about it from a clinical perspective in terms of like maybe say, for example, a heart wall and how their attachment breaks and trauma in childhood has maybe created that wall. I feel like in the past with just therapy, I could say, hey, you have this attachment break and it's caused trauma. And then I'm like, oh, dang, that sucks. Versus now it's giving them tools to help clear that and to know that wall doesn't have to stay up forever. And they can open their heart again and they can find relief and joy, and also know that there can be connections. Say, for example, with grief, I can give them therapy tools and coping skills to help with grief, but then I also can help them connect with loved ones on the other side if that works for them, or even connect with knowing that there's something bigger that helps give them peace. Another thing that I love to do is help people to find purpose in experiences. So whether that's like them creating their own ceremony or creating altars in their home, but to help them to feel connection even in grief and disconnection.
And that's so beautiful because so often we go through that grief, that intense sadness over loss, and we do start to disconnect. We disconnect from those we've loved. We disconnect from spirit, from God. We shut ourselves down because, you know, part of that is that anger. Like if there's this higher power that's guiding me, you've abandoned me or betrayed me or I trusted you, and then bad things happen and it hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And so we start to
Right.
separate and disconnect that piece or disconnect from ourselves so that we
Mm-hmm.
don't have to feel it again. And then we end up living disconnected and then wondering why we can't feel connected and happy to exist even.
Absolutely. Well, and I also think too, sometimes we even disconnect, like you said, disconnect from ourselves and even our bodies. So, like using drumming or even somatic movement and shaking and breath work to tap back into our bodies and really even feel that grief so we can move through it versus have it be stuck and kind of stagnant.
But when you were only a licensed clinical therapist before you brought in the spiritual components, did you find that people, I mean, you kind of talked about it a little bit, that the block would come in and they wouldn't be able to move through with all of the tools. Do you feel like the drumming and having them do some of these exercises are incongruent with trainings that you had before? Or do you feel like they're supportive, just not spoken?
I feel like it's really tricky. I feel like that there's some strategies, like say, for example, more somatic. So like self-drumming or tapping, I think is being recognized within the psychology community. But like say, for example, bringing my drum in within certain settings in the therapy world is not understood, where it gets tricky. And to be honest, even for me as a therapist, if I think back before I started a lot of these practices and building it into bringing it to my clients, I was exhausted all the time. Like as a therapist, I was exhausted because I felt like I was hitting blocks with clients and clients were hitting blocks, and it just seemed like at times there was a lot of cycles that we really were struggling to break. Again, when you're only connecting to the mind and not the body or the spirit, again, our brain takes us so far, or our brain has kind of trained itself that something is true even if it's not. And so I think by being able to tap into spirit, people are able to find their truth versus sometimes our mind does lie to us, and really kind of breaking through that negative perspective and understanding, oh, wait, what I believed was true, you know, and oftentimes we have proof of the truth, right? It's like, oh, this happened and this happened and this happened and the same thing happened with every person I've dated or whatever.
There's some sort of evidence, yes.
Yes. So we see it as true versus finding where we're getting stuck and what is true instead of maybe it is true that I am lovable and I am worthy despite all of these hard relationships or situations.
And then we come to the question of, well, how do I change that? And that's where all of the woo
Yes.
gets introduced and some of the
Yeah.
somatics. So that makes beautiful sense. Let's talk about one of the common things that are coming forward, because psychology has advanced a lot into the metaphysical world with, even like the brain spotting and the tapping
Mhm.
and, sound therapy are things that didn't really exist 20 years ago when I started as well. And even to the point of like psilocybin and ketamine. And so I would love
Mhm.
to tap in a little bit there because I do get asked a lot about that. Like, how do you feel about these substances coming in a
Mhm.
clinical setting or a spiritual setting? I would just love for you to share a little bit more about that.
So for me, I completed a year-long training through the IPI Institute, which was a very, very extensive training. Got certified as a trained psychedelic assisted therapy. So I got training in psilocybin, I got training on ketamine, on other substances as well. Within the state of Utah, the only thing that's legal at this point is ketamine. And so I believe that it's a really beautiful medicine that can create a lot of healing. And I also believe that it is being significantly corrupted by the way that it's being used. And in my opinion, I believe that it should be used in sacred healing spaces where you can fully understand the power of the medicine, but also understand the truth of yourself. So for me, I provide ketamine assisted therapy. Before I ever even offer ketamine assisted therapy, a client does need to do some work with me ahead of time. I don't just provide it without any pre-work. And then within our sessions, the way that I structure my sessions is we do a sacred healing perspective clearing. So we're identifying the negative perspectives, we're identifying the blocks so that the mind can understand what needs to be released and cleared.
So pushing that
Uh,
mind to its limit where it stops, and that's as far as the mind
yeah,
can go before going into everything else.
yes. And I think too, also identifying like the emotions that are connected and getting in the way. So then, so again, as a therapist, I cannot prescribe. So my clients, I have a doctor that I work with. So the doctor prescribes the medications ahead of time and they work with the doctor to make sure it's even an appropriate medication for them. So then they come in, they take after we clear them. So it's a 3 hour long session, which I know people are like, that's a really long time, but it goes really fast. So then they take the medicine, they go into the medicine. While they're in the medicine, I will perform Reiki. I'll use Sun Quantum Reiki. I'll also use Usui Reiki and Fire Reiki to help clear. I'll also use my instruments. So I'll use my drums and rattles and sound bowls and chimes. I also, at times, depending on the need of the client, I typically have like a playlist going in the background that I'll use. And within the playlist, I'll include songs with light codes in them. I might also include songs that kind of speak to maybe what they're working on. And then, depending on the need of the client, and obviously I get consent ahead of time, but I will sometimes use like gentle touch, like on hands, feet to help keep them grounded or their head. Sometimes I'll use tuning forks on their body as well while they're in the medicine. And then typically most people are within the medicine roughly 45 minutes to an hour. Sometimes it's an hour and a half, depending
Mhm.
um, on kind of what, where the medicine takes them. And then we will then talk because ketamine creates neuroplasticity. So within the brain, it's kind of like if you have a snow globe and you shake it up, like you have a fresh layer of snow. So we can create new beliefs, new patterns much easier than typically we would because our brain's like, oh, I can try something new versus
Mhm.
fighting it. And then we will kind of process what they experienced and then also set some goals of like what is it that they can do, whether it's affirmations, whether it's a change in behavior, whether it's writing a letter, a conversation, accepting something. And again, it can be all sorts of things. And I've had the gamut. And I also encourage clients like don't necessarily run out and make a life changing decision in that moment. Like sit with it, make sure it
Finish
resonates.
processing. Yes.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Don't like the second you get out of the medicine, go ask for a divorce. Like, make sure that it fits. So for me, I require clients to either do 3 sessions or 6 sessions just so that they can get the full power of the medicine. Because sometimes, like, they'll start journeying and have an experience, but it doesn't quite finish, so to speak. Kind of like if you have a dream and you wake up halfway. And so I've found it's much more effective. Again, not everyone needs 6, but it seems like 3 to 6 is a good number. There's a couple of times with clients I've gone as much as 10, and typically those are clients that are actively suicidal and really struggling to be on this planet, and helping them get to a place where they can tolerate being on this planet. For me personally, I don't do more than that because I don't think it's needed, because I believe that we have the power to heal ourselves, and I can be a conduit and the medicine can be a conduit, but it is not the solution. And I feel like where this, for me, something that creates a lot of sadness is I feel like sometimes people are forgetting that they are their own answer, and instead they're turning to medicine to give them the answer. And I think that we forget that sometimes it's needed to reach that place, but it's not the only way to get to the quantum, into the 5D, and so also, in addition to medicine, exploring other avenues, whether that's breath work, whether that's brain spotting, EMDR, whether that's spending time in nature and meditation, and really recognizing, like, we can connect to source without a substance. And yes, substances are beautiful ways, and I've seen amazing healing happen through it, but I don't think it's the only way. And I think too, people sometimes use medicine, in my opinion, as a spiritual bypass instead of doing the work to really connect to yourself and source, whatever your source may be. It's sometimes like, oh, I'll just take this substance, whatever that substance might be.
I went to Peru and I studied with the maestros there and received beautiful healing work. And one of the women that was facilitating, she had shared with me, like, oh, yeah, I've had my medicine journey 40 times and it's always the same thing. And I couldn't help but kind of laugh and say, well, you're probably not getting the message or doing the thing if it's repeating.
Right.
Because I love that you add the 3 to 6 times, because each journey is probably very different for them as well as they continue on.
Right.
They're not repeating the same experience. It's like, okay, we processed that, we healed that, now let's see what's underneath, and let's see what's underneath.
Right.
I even had somebody ask me once, like, I hear this doing the work, what does it look like? And the way you just explained it, like, here's the process. Doing the work means you do all the work you can by yourself, and or with somebody, but beforehand, without the medicine. And then while in the medicine, you don't necessarily have somebody programming you, but you have these supportive frequencies that your body will naturally respond to. And then afterwards, there is a going forward action plan. So there is work and action and effort going forward with the information you received. I often think of, like, anciently, when we would travel to a shaman and we would go to these healers, like, humanity would have to travel. They would have to journey before the journey. There was some type of pilgrimage, and it was usually once in your lifetime, maybe twice. But it was when you were ready for a death and a rebirth. It was ready for when you were ready for an initiation and shedding your old life and going into the new. And if every week you're shedding your old life and going into the new, you don't have time to actually build anything. And so you're breaking things down. And so you end up feeling, just from what I've seen and even my experiences, like, you end up feeling more broken than you were before because you keep shedding, but you're not taking the time to actively build and manifest and call in new things into your life.
Well, and I think too, another thing that I've seen a lot that I think is a disservice, I think is happening more within the mental health community, is Spravato, which is nasal ketamine, is being used in doctors' offices and has been approved by insurance. So again, I believe that it is helpful for some people, but I think where the problem lies is people go into doctors' offices, they're not given any guidance or support. They're sat in a chair in front of a TV with a screen with fishes swimming across and given this highly powerful substance, and they're not given a way to process or even understand or even direction. So, like, for me, again, I'm very, very thoughtful in even like the playlist in the background. And there's clients that are going in that aren't given any direction or even told like, hey, here's what would be helpful. So I had a client that before working with me had gone into a doctor's office, gotten this medicine, and was listening to like Smashing Pumpkins and couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. You know.
Well, and even with any medicine, like the idea of plant medicines or chemical medicines that open up, it's to open up those parts of your mind, to
Right.
open up your sensitivity so that you can actually feel the energy, you can feel more emotions, you can feel the frequencies that are around you in your field. And like, for example, I had a surgery and they were starting to put me under anesthesia, and the doctor started playing a podcast, and it is a podcast that I cannot stand the sound of this man's voice. I can't
Yeah.
stand what the topics of conversation. I'm like, it is not in alignment with me. And I'm like starting to go out, like it's already been
Right.
administered. And I was like, oh no, this is going to be programmed into my body because anesthesia has like
Right.
the ketamine in it, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, this is going to influence me while I'm like, literally, my body is physically
It's
open
open. Yeah.
and my field is open. I am vulnerable. And I was like, no. And I could hear just inside my head screaming. And then I was like, wait a minute, wait a minute. I can tell my body what frequency to receive. And
Yeah.
as I was going out, I envisioned this bubble around me. And I was like, all of that stays outside of the bubble. I'm going into my bubble. And I started in my head humming some music and
Mm-hmm.
just sacred sounds. And I'm like, this is the frequency we're going to carry. This is the one that we're going to access because we have access to everything. This is the
Absolutely.
station I'm listening to. And
Yes.
actually, when I came out, it was really interesting because I remember very distinctly, like as soon as I woke up, it wasn't like a soft wake up, it was like a boom. And I like jumped up forward and I
Mhm.
was like, whoa, I went so far into the cosmos. And I'm telling the nurse, and she's like, oh, you're high, and I can see it on her face. And I was like, no, I actually talk this way all the time.
Yeah.
It's
You're
normal.
like,
Never
this
mind. You
is
won't
my,
understand. But then
yeah.
I started weaving it back, and I was like, wait, where was I? What was I doing for me to come out that intensely with like,
Yeah.
and I remember pieces where it was like I was digging into things in my family and healing things
Mhm.
with my relationship with my father. And so there
Right.
was a level of healing that happened. And even what I was needing surgery for, I found a thread that was tied to trauma from my father. So like that weaving is still
Yeah.
going through. And I sometimes think, wow, how interesting is it that perhaps the reason this illness came and this need came was related to trauma that I had as a child. And while I'm physically healing the trauma, I have the opportunity to travel and unconsciously heal it as well. And so it's definitely interesting how so much influence can come in. And I've seen and heard stories of people who have experienced like either the clinical doctor setting, like those
Right.
doctors, it's just job, it's just their 9 to 5. Somebody before probably had a cough that came
Yeah.
in, or, and so there's so much fear at the doctor's office and at the hospital
Mhm.
already left on imprints because everything we feel, we can literally influence all of our
Right.
objects, which is why I have so many objects with positive influence because we soak it
Yeah.
in. And so I love that you're creating this container because I've seen and heard of people who do not create that container and then they come out more muddled than they were
Mhm.
before because
Yeah.
there's all of this external information while they're so open. Like you think of shaking the snow globe, and now you have this pristine, easily influenced, but that can work for positive results or negative
We're
results.
native. Absolutely. Well, and that's why I think it is so important to number one, go in with intention, because I also feel like that there's unfortunately a lot of access. And so I think having an intention and goal with going into the medicine versus like, oh, I have access, so I might as well use it. Also having a plan of how to utilize the information. Because otherwise, like you said, I think like, with the woman that had the lesson 40 times, it's like, okay, why do you need medicine to get the same lesson? What are you not learning? What are you not integrating? And I think so often that's the part that's missed is the integration. And I think it's also, like you said, recognizing the integration sometimes can take months or years. And so when I see people they feel pressure to be like, oh, I need to have a journey weekly or every month or whatever. I guess my question to them would be like, yes, the medicine is beautiful. I myself have healed through it. And what messages are you missing? And how do you really embody and live those messages? Because, too, another example is there was a shaman that came from South America, and he was saying with the medicine that he was using, like he had the same scenario, and he realized like, oh, the message is I got the message, and so he stopped using the medicine because he realized like, oh, I can get to a place of peace. And, through the medicine, he had kind of the visuals that helped show him what peace looked like for him. And like, I don't need to keep going back there. Like, peace is within me. Heaven is within us. And how do we create heaven within our own existence outside of the medicine?
Yes, it's like the medicine offers, like, this is what is possible. You can feel this way all the time. This is the connections you can have. See how you're connected with everything. Great. Now that you know what this feels like, that emotion, because emotion is
Right.
energy in motion. And if we are manifesting and creating, emotion forms matter because what matters to
Yeah.
us is formed. That's what we put our attention on. So
Mhm.
being able to connect in with that and have an emotional experience with it allows us to see, oh, okay, that's what I'm building towards. That's what I'm going
Right.
to create. That's what I'm going to go over here and shed these pieces that are in misalignment with that so that I can get to that point. And then when I'm at that point all the time, it would be appropriate to look at and explore going into another journey to see if I can
Right.
go deeper into something.
Yeah.
But I find that most people who operate that way, they're like, no, it's really good. I don't really feel called until they do.
So they are. Yeah. And that's what I would also say is I think that medicine needs to be a calling, not just a weekend adventure.
Yes. Well, and even in my experience, so I went to Peru and I studied with like the original source because I really
Mm.
felt like this is something that I only want to do once. I don't
Mm.
love being high. I don't love being drunk. And so I don't like the out of control. So I know it's going to challenge a lot of me.
Yeah.
But I wanted to go to the most original source. And when I experienced that, I felt like it was a shift in understanding, but it also still matched everything that I was already
Mm.
working with. But the part that I
Right.
didn't expect is when I returned home, I felt massively suicidal. And it's like life doesn't matter anymore. And I would have these horrific visions. And like it was a lot of intensity. And I think most
Yeah.
people don't expect the existing on a lower vibration after you've experienced that higher vibration. And perhaps
Yeah.
that's why some people still go to that so often because it's like, oh my
Absolutely.
gosh, regular life really sucks. Like I have to get up in
Mm.
the morning and take my kids to school still, and I'm tired.
Yeah. And that's where I think the work does come in. It does take work to like sit and do breath work. It does take work to like meditate, or it does take work to be like, oh, dang, I have some negative perspectives. How do I clear them? Or how do I bubble myself and protect myself and really take lessons into practice? And I think that's also true of therapy. Like, it's not just about complaining and being like, oh, I feel better because I vented it. It's like, okay, what's my next step?
And to be able to have somebody that you can say, hey, some weird stuff's happening and I'm not sure what to do with it and help. And that knows the medicine and has the appropriate training to go with the medicine because a lot of people, I've heard this too, probably dozens of times. Like, I had this medicine journey and now I am supposed to serve this medicine. So I'm going to start doing it because the medicine wants it. And I'm like, the medicine has its own consciousness too. It wants attention too. And so is the medicine calling you to this because is it your ego coming through, or is the medicine calling because the medicine wants to be utilized, or is it actually your soul's purpose? So have you ever experienced that after you've worked with someone?
In my opinion, that there can be lots of pathways to your soul's purpose. Like, yes, medicine can be part of that. And there can be other pieces too. And I also think something that I'm seeing a lot with my clients specifically, I'm not saying this is general, but I also have clients that sometimes after a period says, okay, I'm done with the medicine. I have the message and here's my next steps. And sometimes the next steps is, doing training and serving the medicine themselves And for other people, it's saying, okay, this was part of my journey, but it's not the end of my journey,
I
you
love that
know?
difference. Yeah.
And so it can also be like, okay, yeah, I'm called to serve, but I'm also called to serve in Reiki, or I'm called to serve in the sacred healing perspective, or through volunteer work. I mean, so I think too, it's knowing it can come in a lot of avenues.
So I'm sure other people are wondering this too, because you've mentioned it a few times during our conversation. What is brain spotting?
So brain spotting, actually, I have my brain spotting stick. My daughter calls it the brain stick.
The
So
brain.
brain spotting it was designed by Dr. David Grand, and it's similar to EMDR. So what he found is that the position of our eyes connects to different parts of our brain. And we store memories in different parts of our brain. So sometimes the easiest way I know how to explain it is it's kind of like if you've seen Inside Out and they have all those memory balls. The goal of brain spotting is to kind of grab one of those memory balls and process it and look at it and even expand. So through the position of our eyes, we're then able to extract that memory ball, so to speak. And the beautiful thing about brain spotting is that there doesn't have to be a lot of talking. Sometimes we're able to find ties and connections that we wouldn't otherwise consciously be aware of. So sometimes it's kind of like we have a string, kind of like a string of pearls. We have a string of memory balls that kind of attach to each other. And by exploring one, we're able to then understand others along that string. And so as we kind of put those strings together, we're then able to sometimes clear negative perspectives or even have a greater understanding of why we act in the ways that we act. And at the same time, it also allows us to expand and have more balanced perspectives or understanding. So, say, for example, for me, as I was training in brain spotting, I also got brain spotted. And so I had an experience at work that I felt invalidated by a boss. And so as I was brain spotting, kind of the image that came is I was walking through the forest and my old boss came up to me and I had a crown and she knocked the crown off my head. So again, has that ever happened? No, I don't typically walk around with crowns, but through brain spotting, it helped give me the messages. And then through brain spotting, I was able over time and over multiple sessions, able to kind of pick up the crown and put the crown back on and really kind of reclaim my power. And part of reclaiming my power ended up in that situation being leaving that job, finding another job, but it helped give me the direction of what do you need to reclaim. And through brain spotting, it helped give me kind of the direction. And then I got to figure out what were the steps. You know, I've also had clients that in brain spotting sessions, and brain spotting, you can work based on a specific memory or you can work based on a sensation. So say, for example, oh, I'm having tightness in my chest and we can brain spot on that. And then memories or images will come up. You know, so I've had clients that have had images come up that's like, oh my gosh, that happened 30 years ago. And I didn't even realize that that was tied to what I'm feeling now. And then once we have that awareness, then we can clear it and move forward.
And I love the similarity of accessing this unconscious part of us that all the answers are within you. It's just sometimes needing clarity to see that they're there with both the plant medicine we talked about and with the brain spotting. So it's not necessarily a chemical that creates it. It's actually our bodies just opening and acknowledging what's there.
Well, and what I love about brain spotting too is sometimes even during brain spotting sessions, I'll have the brain stick in one hand, but also be doing Reiki with my other hand. And so it's letting me and clients benefit from the positive energies and vibrations while also really exploring their unconscious to get that deeper healing. So again, it allows me to combine the two worlds versus just traditional brain spotting where it's looking at a spot.
I remember when I had brain spotting, and it wasn't with you, it was with someone else, but I did notice like she'd have me look at places and all of a sudden I'd just start sobbing, but I didn't have any context. And so it's just like, and she'd ask me questions and I couldn't quite answer the questions. I'm like, she's like, what's the emotion you're feeling? What color is it? What shape is it? And I'm like, I don't even know. Like, this is so back
Yeah.
there. And I had a really hard time forming any words. And so I just started saying emotions, saying like, okay, if it's this, go. If it's that, go. If I'm calling out the wrong one, then that's fine. But I can see the value of knowing that pin dot of, oh, this is tied in with this age because of your intuitive gifts. You can say, oh, it's this age. Oh, it's related to this. Oh, it's related to that. Because I mean, for me, I've had so many traumatic experiences. I once timeline mapped them. And at the time, I didn't have a single year without something major traumatic happening. And
Yeah.
so I thought it was really unfair and all of these things. But if I'm going to tap in, I'm like, well, there's some that are like the obvious and loud ones, like, oh, you had attempted murder against, like, from
Right.
your partner you loved. So obviously that's this. And I'm like, but it could also be something so tiny and insignificant, like
Yeah.
stuttering when I went to speak in class. You know, both of those
Absolutely.
traumas register pretty intensely. And so that,
Yeah.
like, those tears could be literally anything.
Anything.
And
Yeah.
so I really like the clarity because then the mind can continue working with it and understanding, oh no, we healed that. So we don't need to go down that path anymore. We don't need to
Yeah.
believe this false belief anymore. We can open our heart up and we can actually feel what we want to feel
Mhm.
because we're safe and that fear is gone because we're no longer carrying that evidence.
Well, and I think too with brain spotting, you also can create expansion or manifestation spots. So it's also expanding on the positive that you want.
Mm.
So like for example, I worked with someone that had a lot of abandonment, and so we worked on expanding and manifesting times that they felt really loved and connected. And through that they were able to kind of strengthen their marriage and find success in relationships versus kind of pushing people away.
Not just always, again, doing the death, but you're
Yeah.
allowing some rebirth to kick in too. Well, any other shares or tips for those who have been looking at expanding and healing, whether clinical to spiritual, and bridging those in your plethora of gifts?
Kind of two things. One is I would say allow yourself to play. I think sometimes, I know for me in my clinical training, I really was taught like it needs to come from a manual, it needs to be from science, it needs to be evidence based. And I think the other thing is like we're finding that all these spiritual things are evidence based. And so figure out what works for you, and don't be scared to try a little bit. So for me, sometimes a session might look like brain spotting. It might look like a ketamine assisted therapy. It also could look like we're talking and I have clients pull a tarot card and they're like, dang it, I got called out by the universe again, or drumming. So I think it's finding what resonates for you and letting yourself play. And if something doesn't resonate, to be like, cool, I tried it. And I always tell my clients, try it once. And if you hate it, we'll do something different.
The life's
you
an
know,
experiment. It's not always
yeah.
controlled.
And I think the other thing that I would suggest is knowing that there is, again, from like the IFS model, there is different parts of us. And so it's okay to know that different things work for different parts. So maybe our 5-year-old part needs to throw a tantrum because things weren't fair as a child. And so giving ourselves permission to, take a pool noodle and go attack a tree and scream and yell, and then sometimes like the teenage angsty part of ourself needs time to wear crazy makeup and listen to heavy metal and have a dance party,
Yeah.
and sometimes the adult part of us needs time to just cry and journal, and letting all of those parts have a place.
Without saying that anything's wrong with us or we're broken because that part comes out and gets expressed, but actually acknowledging, oh,
Absolutely.
this is just a piece that gets to play so that I can feel more balance.
And sometimes even helping people around you by naming it, by being like, hey, this is my 5-year-old self, and my 5-year-old self is throwing a tantrum. So, like, love me anyway.
We were recently in at Mount Shasta frolicking, and
Yes.
I'm sitting there looking, and everybody sees this tree that lightning had hit, and it had this like fairy portal, and I'm like, oh, and they're like, Holly's inner child, her little fairy self wants to go into that hole. And I'm like, yes, it does. But it's okay. I'll be responsible. It's fine. They're like, what makes you think you can't be both? Keep walking, go
Yeah.
frolic, and come catch up. And I'm like, okay. And so I did. I ran off into the woods and went inside of it, and it was so magical. And then I was like, oh, and now I can go back to being this part that's like in charge of other people's safety. So I'm going to be reckless here for a second, but also everybody's safe. But it's important because even in that moment, the amount of healing of just being seen and them
Mhm.
acknowledging, like, we see that you really want to do this thing and we can see that you're torn. So let us support you back by allowing you to do this and really not judging or caring and celebrating that you get to have something just for you. And so it was, I think even sharing that my 5-year-old self is throwing a tantrum. My 5-year-old self wants to go into the hollow tree right now. you know,
Yes.
allowing other people to see it and then see that they see it and you're not rejected because of it. Like that
Yeah.
is so deeply nourishing, I feel like, for our inner psyche and our emotional self because we get to see that, oh, I'm where I'm celebrated, not just tolerated. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, I can be me. All the parts
So,
of me.
yes. And I think it gives people permission to be all the parts of them too.
Yes. Oh, so delicious. This has been an amazing conversation to connect in with the clinical world and the spiritual world. So thank you so much for sharing your
Yes. Thank
wisdom.
you for having me.
If people want to get connected with you, how do they find you?
Probably the easiest way is through my website. So it's aspiringjourney.com.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been a Sacred Unweaving podcast, bridging our spirituality and unraveling the delicious truths. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Love you guys. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.